Hello guys, welcome to the stream. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Let's turn the music down a smidge. So I thought I'd start the stream a little bit different today. Instead of just jumping straight into some gameplay, some quick play, some Overwatch. What I want to do, let's do a bit of tier list action. With the recent introduction of map voting to Overwatch 2, every map voting screen I've been contemplating to myself which one is the best one to choose, which one I really wouldn't want to choose. And it's been getting me thinking about which maps are the best, which maps are the worst, and which maps are just somewhere in between. So I've created a tier list. Every single map in Overwatch 2. I think every single map. There might be some like event maps. I haven't included any Lucio Ball maps or the Winston Beach Volleyball. But there's Control, there's Escort, there's Hybrid, Flashpoint. There's even some stadium unique maps. Where is it? Arena Victoriae, Gogadoro. The two stadium-specific control maps. There's only one variant on each, whereas as you can see with some of the other control maps, we have got all three of them. So, let's get started. The tiering system is the best of the best. These are the maps that I will always vote for, unless there's more than one of them, and then I'll have a tough time deciding which map I'm really going to vote for. Really great maps. They're maps that I think are just great. Not necessarily any cons, but they're not the best of the best. And we've got B, fun to play. Maps that you enjoy playing from time to time. Like, you could skip them if you weren't feeling them. Maybe you've had some poor match performances on them. Maybe you've had some competitive losses that have really stuck with you and that sort of tarnished the map for the rest of all time. And we've got C, still okay, but getting a bit meh. These are the maps in the middle. Neither good nor bad. Maybe not quite as harsh as saying bad, but maps that you think they could use a little love. Maybe the developers and Blizzard could have a little work around with them and see what they can do. D, would rather not play this one. This is what really sort of got me started thinking about this sort of stuff when map voting. Which ones would I rather not play? Because quite often you'd get 3 maps, and I'm not necessarily going to want to play any of them, all 3, but which one would I rather not play the least? We've got E, really scraping the bottom of the map barrel, which is, I'll tolerate it. If the general consensus of the 10 people playing, or 12, whenever they bring map voting to 6v6, the general consensus is we're playing that map, then okay, that's fine. And then F, obviously, the absolute worst. The lowest of the low. Lower than the bottom of the barrel. The floor underneath the dirty, horrible dead spiders and all of that crap underneath the barrel. The absolute worst. I'm not sure if any will make that tier, but I'll try not to put too many in each tier, and we'll see if we can get some in each. So we're going to start off with the control maps. I've put one for each of the 3 maps. So we've got, and this, I didn't think it'd be that small. I've made these map icons myself of the icon for the game mode and the name of the map. And the font was as large as it could, that it could fit across the width of the image, but clearly it's still a little bit too small, so let me just zoom in a tad. I'm not sure if that helped in any way, but we'll go with it. This is Antarctic Peninsula Icebreaker, the massive ship that's crashed into the Antarctic Peninsula splitting the map in two. Now, I actually really like this map. It's got quite a good entryway around all the ice caverns and stalactites, and you can take the high ground left or right depending on which entryway you're coming from. Then you've got the big ship in the middle, which you can, well, that's where the point is. That's where everybody's going to end up. I think it's fun to play. I know there's a lot of people that really don't like Antarctic Peninsula. This is the map with the penguins, is it not? Where you can like look off the edge of the ship, the bow. Is it the bow? Is it the stern? It's one of the two. Port and starboard are left and right. But yeah, I'll go with that for B. And we've got the labs, which I think is the main one, and it's the one that they used in that sort of Halloween terror Sigma. Was it More of the Void or some sort of like, there was a giant pit in the middle where the control point is. There was a giant pit, you fell in and it turned you into an evil person. You turned against the team. I wasn't so much of a fan of the game mode. I do like Halloween Terror, but the game mode itself, I kind of like, it felt like a cooperative mode where it didn't need somebody to turn against you. I'm sure the person who really enjoys Betrayal and that sort of Among Us vibe really gets a kick out of that sort of thing. But as a map, I've spent far too long trying to get through the choke at the start. Most often recently with Freyas and Ashes and all sorts going on, that I'm going to put it in D. I would rather not play that one. Just wouldn't rather play it. Obviously, if you're picking Antarctic Peninsula, you're going to get at least two of them. Which brings me on to the third one, the sub-level, which I think is right in the middle. It's a good map. Again, it's got good entryways through the sort of caverns of ice. You've got different ways you can go. I know you've got different ways you can go with the labs, but I feel like everybody gravitates towards the big entryway to the point and not the little doorways to the left and right, or the external bit to the right or left, depending on which way you're coming from. With the labs, you've got your high ground, it's clearly defined, and that high ground extends to the middle of the map, so it gives you a great vantage looking down. But, in fairness, as you can see, there's also the high ground behind the point on each side, so that there's a lot of vantage points that you can take, and it makes for a lot more dynamic playstyles, is what I think. So overall, if we average it out, I think Antarctic Peninsula is a C. You know, you'd enjoy playing it. I certainly would. I mean, this is my tier list, so sorry if you think differently. I enjoy playing it, but it's not necessarily one that I would vote for. Now we're moving on to Busan. Busan, the South Korean map that came, I think, towards the end of Overwatch 1's life cycle. We got the downtown map here, which is the outside map with the streets leading down into the control point, down the steps and looking over the sea to the left, the coast. I don't mind this one. I have had a lot of sticking points with Widowmakers and such, taking the high grounds leading down and, you know, having to think of different ways to get into the map. But visually it's very nice. It's very reminiscent of an inner city with different buildings and places to navigate through on your way down to that control point. So I would say that this is a B. It's fun to play. I'm not necessarily overly enamored with my experience of it, but I won't let it detract from the visuals of it. MEKA base for me has always been a bit grey. I mean, it's inside, it's metal, it's sort of almost futuristic. It's sort of like just a MEKA base. Like, it reminds me of Halo, and You'd think that that would be a good thing, but I'm going to put it in E. Because I don't enjoy playing it. I don't like the raising barriers on the point. You can use them for cover, but I feel like you use them for cover too often and then miss time when they're going down and you're just exposed. I don't think anybody really uses. There's a bit to the left of this image here with the cylinder that you can jump down and go to the low ground. Not enough people use that, certainly in the ranks that I'm playing, to sort of go down and underneath. Invariably, the fights always tend to be on the high ground to the stairs leading towards people's spawn. So if you don't capture the point and don't have the advantage, you're getting spawn camped essentially from the stairs. Not the first set of stairs leading up to the sort of the medium room, but the next set of stairs where everybody can just sort of stay up there, deny your entry. You get the brave DPS trying to get the high ground like the Widows, but the angle is pretty harsh and sharp for them to do anything about it. So it's just, for me, a ton of bad experiences. Then we got the Sanctuary, which is a lovely open map, great for flyers, great for anyone with angles and sight lines that they could take advantage of. Sort of your Faras, your Echoes, Kiriko, Ash. Very open. I also like that you can stand on top of the barrel in the middle and nobody knows you're there most of the time. Again, this is probably indicative of the rank I'm playing at, which is sort of platinum between gold and diamond. So I would put that in C. I don't like it as much as downtown, but if I'm playing downtown and Sanctuary and get to avoid MEKA base, then I'm happy with that. So overall, I'd say that Busan as well gets a C. Which is odd. They both got a C so far. C for Control. Ilios, classic Overwatch 1 map. Very white, particularly the Lighthouse one, as you can see from the pictures, but that is representative of Greece. The white houses built to reflect the sun and keep everything bright. We'll start with Lighthouse. Everyone knows Lighthouse. Big lighthouse in the middle, the room everybody captures. Lucio's booping you off the edge. This is a very Lucio map, I feel. Ilios on particularly Lighthouse and Well. I'm going to put Lighthouse in A. It's really great. Doesn't quite make the best of the best. I have had some bad experiences on Lighthouse myself. But overall, yeah, really like it. Very visually, very clean, very open to who you can play on the map. You can play a lot of flyers, you can play a lot of hit scan, you can play pretty much any support. I think works well on Ilios because of the cover, because of the high grounds, because of the angles that you can play. The streets are sort of like straight street, but you can take your different angles up the left and the right through the building. I think it's a really great map. Moving on to Ruins, I'm going to say it's slightly less. You do have that sort of variety in different types of high ground, low ground. The ruins themselves are very dramatic. I like what they did with the, what was it, the Medusa Greek mythology event, I think for season 2 when Junker Queen had her mythic, and they did that event where everybody was a Greek mythological character, like Widowmaker would stare at you and turn you to stone, all that sort of stuff. That was a cool event. I didn't play much of it because it was free-for-all, and I'm not really the best at that sort of stuff. I tend to get overwhelmed when there's 7 pairs of eyes staring at me. But as a map, Ruins is pretty good. It's fun to play. You've got the boopability factor on the right-hand side here, with just the giant chasm that goes down to the rest of the world below. I think this might be where I got my Farah kill someone with a concussive blast achievement and spray way back in, what, 2017 now. So, yeah, and some good memories on this map too. Well, notorious for Roadhogs, Lucio's, boops into the well. Even seen a few Orissas jump into the middle of the well, cast their ult and pull people in. I think it's still fun to play. You've got your high grounds. You can contest the point from a lot of different angles. There's the rooms to the left and the right. There's a little high ground above that sort of yellow room, and the reverse on the other side that you can look down onto the point and the rest of your team from. And the is it the clock tower, the big tower itself, you can get pretty high up on. And there's not just the sort of the roof that you can stand on. There's pieces of architecture that you can stand on high up, particularly if you're an Asher or Widowmaker, and you can almost, I think eventually you might be able to see their spawn from that high up. So a very good vantage point for any of those sniper characters. So overall, I think Ilios it nets a B. If we're averaging it out, it's very fun to play. I enjoy playing it. Not too many negatives. I think more positives than negatives overall. So yeah. Lijiang, classic. I think this might be the map I played first of all in Overwatch. I got Overwatch in January, February 2017, so Lunar New Year was the event that was playing when I started playing. So capture the flag in Lijiang. Everything's red and gold and fireworks everywhere, and it just felt so festive and happy. So I think regardless of what the map looks like now, I have that sort of warmth and nostalgia for it. And it's really nice to see it get used again in another event for the, prop hunt, trick, mischief and magic, where you can be Kiriko and Genji, turn into props. That being the night market one exclusively, I think. But we'll start with the control center, which is the indoor map, which I think is my least favorite of the three, just because it's indoors and there's not really much going on outside. And if there is stuff going on outside, you're either spawn camping or being spawn camped. So for that reason, I'd rather not play control center. However, garden, S, and night market, S. I think I've got the picture wrong for both of those. They're both the same. We'll just pretend that that's the garden with the or the night market, whichever one is the one with the control point in the middle and the big octagonal, perhaps. I'm not really sure if it's a circular room or a big octagon or decagon in the middle. Both of them, I really like them. I've seen people like S-Gang and Frogger do really crazy rollouts on the octagon map, we'll call it, where they Lucio jump from spawn to the control point in a matter of seconds, stuff that I couldn't even comprehend doing, having only played Overwatch on PC for about a month properly now. And yeah, night market, probably the first real map I played. I believe that's the one with the capture the flag. And it recently turned into prop hunt as well. Playing it outside of those modes, it's fun as well. You've got the boop ability off pretty much 3 sides of the main point. You can hold pretty well from either angle. There's some high grounds as well, just outside the point, looking down into the area with the statues. This sort of area here. Yeah, overall, I think they're really great maps, and I'm not really one for control, as you can see how many are sort of C and below so far. But Lijiang, I think that's the best control map there is. And overall, it will get an S tier from me. Nepal. We've got 3 maps in Nepal: the Sanctum, the Shrine, and the Village. And for me as well, these are sort of nostalgic Overwatch 1 maps, where there weren't that many maps live in Overwatch 1 when I was playing. I don't think any updates had come out other than Anna, and I think Sombra maybe had just come out. I'm not sure whether any map releases had happened, so this one, for me, really brings back memories of playing Overwatch 1 for the first time and sort of learning how to do everything back on console and Xbox with my friends. Sanctum, a really good map for Lucio again. You've got the... I'm not sure who designed this building architecturally, but if you were a Nepalese architect who built a sanctuary inside a building with a bottomless pit, what were you doing? It's just a safety hazard. From a gameplay point of view, very fun. Very fun. You can be roadhog hooking people off. I've had roadhog incidents where I've used my ult and knocked people down into the pit. There's good points to contest. I particularly like the sort of the high ground walls around the inner edge of the middle point. So for this one, Sanctum's getting an A from me. Shrine, I like a little bit less, just because the entry to the middle point here is just so open. You try and get from the streets to these two pillars either side, and it feels like a little too much being in the open. You can take the inner route, but I find that those are always heavily guarded by things like Tracer, Widowmaker always taking a perch on the high wall there. So for me, just from a personal gameplay perspective, that's a C. I'll enjoy it, but I wouldn't necessarily pick it myself. And the village, I'm torn. I don't know whether to put it A or B. Because it is really fun. You've got your high ground, that little wooden bridge at the top there, and then you can stand around the entirety of the control point in the middle and contest either of the chokes coming through. And using that bridge, you can contest the entryways from all of the various buildings on the slightly higher portion of the map. I think we'll go with A. We'll go with A for village. It also was used for the Winston and the May, what was it, the Yeti hunt, which I very much enjoyed. Very much enjoy playing Yeti hunt. Hard as a Winston, especially when you've got Mays who know what they're doing. And a good Christmas event if you want to blast out some wins quickly, because you can just play as May and really freeze and block off and control where the Winston goes and trap all of his meat. But as a map, very fun to play. Really good map. Oasis, probably my least favourite of all the control maps. I just think they're all quite samey. They've all got this sort of orangey yellow hue to them. City Centre, I think I'd rather not play. Not a lot, guys. It's just a standard. You walk to the midi point, the little doorway. You walk to the point. There's not much going on. You can take a high ground. The high ground is sort of shared, so it's heavily contestable. Though, from experience, it's nothing that my team would ever contest. It's always a soldier or a Widowmaker on the other team that's up there, and I'm cowering as a support, wondering how am I gonna do anything about it. Gardens is a little bit nicer. Aesthetically, I think it's the nicest of the three. Very green, lots of foliage on the walls, a good high ground, sort of reminiscent of that. Which one was it from Antarctica? This one, the sub levels with the extended high ground that is also shared. Both sides can go up the stairs, but then you've got it protruding into the center of the point. I'm going to give that a B. So that's the funnest one to play of them. But then I think University is similar to City Centre in so much as it's a straight walk to a sort of midi room, and then you've got your point. You can go through a small corridor. It's probably not a good idea. This is, in my perspective and my viewpoint, quite a Junkrat heavy map, because he can spam over walls and through corridors and stuff like that. High ceilings, so you can get away with playing a flyer. I've seen Echoes and Faras do quite well, but for me overall, it's not my favourite map. So I think overall that probably nets Oasis a low C, maybe a D. We'll go with D. If I saw Oasis, it's not often that I'd vote for it, unless I got two equally terrible maps that I didn't want to play. Samoa is a very new map. Although very new, it's probably a couple of years old now. It's an Overwatch 2 map for sure. So they came out around when MEKA came out. Very fresh, very summery, very sunny. Perfect for the beach. And I think beach itself is an A tier map. So you've got your walk to the point, various huts. I don't know that much fighting goes on in that area. Then you've got the main sort of, I guess you'd call it sort of like a chalet, an entry building before the descent into the main pit of the control point. And you've got various angles you can contest. There's the surfboard racks to use for cover. You've got the other building far across to the left there that you can sort of take an angle from. You've got the high ground over here that you can use. And there's an entire under ring as well. So you've got all these sorts of layers of verticality playing around with each other to make for a very interesting and dynamic map. Samoa Downtown. This is their map with the sort of the descent through the streets into a central control point that's sort of like a strange corridor, a bit like which one was it? The Oasis outside map. Yeah, the city centre where there's just that sort of circular room in the middle. Samoa has that sort of strange corridor in between the rectangular room. I'm not sure why everybody's fighting to contest that small room. There's something going on in there that we don't know of. Overall, I think this is probably the worst of the three. A little, as I say with Oasis City Centre, a bit samey. You know, you walk to the point, couple of rooms, a building to the left or the right, depending on the perspective you're coming in from, and just a big control point in the middle with a pillar essentially and a corridor in the way. Now, Volcano is an interesting map. I'm not sure whether I love it enough to put it in S, or whether it's just really good, a really great map. You know what? For a control map, as someone who doesn't like control maps, I think anytime, if maps were there to be selected singularly, and I could pick Samoa Volcano, that would probably get my vote every time. You've got the sort of wide open bit with your airship that leads into the volcano base. You've got the opening out into the control area that sort of you look to your right or your left and you see this sprawling mess of lava and volcano. It's just very angry and atmospheric and gives it a lot of character. You've got the point that's sort of walled but in sort of like a corner frame of view, so you can go through the middle, the left, the right. There's a hole in the middle that goes down to a jump pad with a like sort of lava room. I think they described that in the trailer for when Samoa first came out as like a little death room where you could boot people into the lava down there who sort of fell down the hole in the middle. But I don't think people use that quite as often. You've got the right side with the sort of the descent, the stairs that go to that room, and then the ascent on the other side. Again, a lot of people using this more for cover and escape rather than a means to engage in a team fight. Overall, I really like Volcano. I think it's S tier, and would be happy to play it. Then we got a little bonus round. These two maps, Arena Victoriae, Victorious Arena, and Gogadoro. are both maps that are exclusive to the Stadium game mode. So if you've not seen them, you've not played any Stadium yet, I presume. And these are just sort of singular control maps. There's only one control point, a central control point. For the arena, it's sort of like it reminds me of Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. You know, when you're trying to storm, I think it's Cesare Borgia's palace or castle at night, and everything's sort of like moody and dark, and everything is lit by fire, and you have to swing and climb and avoid guards or assassinate them as Ezio would. So I don't know if that sort of impacts my decision positively as a map. I think it's quite engaging. You've got the high ground on the left or right as you come in, that you can take and look down onto the central point around the statue. The statue isn't sort of like a weird corridor where you can go inside and hide indefinitely if you're, I don't know, a Junkrat or somebody waiting, spawn camping, not spawn camping, but just general camping with a trap and a mine and a one-shot potential. There's a statue you can use for cover, you can navigate around it. There's little walls as well. Around the outside, there's sort of a corridor that sort of rings around the whole thing. So 3/4 of it is low ground, 1/4 is the high ground that you can look down upon. I think it's a good map. Very, very fitting of the Stadium mantra of just sort of quick, engaging, easy to navigate. You know exactly where you're going and what you need to do. So for that, I think it's a great map. Now, Gogadoro, I'm not really sure where this is supposed to be, and I apologize for that, but it gives me Busan vibes with the sort of like the light grey buildings, the streets that are sort of like winding around building work and this billboard, and then leading up into a central control point, rather than perhaps the opposite of the Busan downtown that leads down into a control point. And unfortunately, I think some gameplay itself leads to me to detract a few points from this because of certain negative experiences I've had trying to control and contest the point itself, and people going around the little bus that's sort of parked to the right of the control point, the little corridors. Again, I find it's sort of like once you've captured that point and you are in control, you can very much dominate because it's high ground looking down so far to the enemies, who have to descend to then ascend towards the point. So it's almost like they're at a double disadvantage, having to go low ground to go high ground. So I think it's okay. Not the best, not the worst. If this comes up in my Stadium list of 7 maps in a row, I'm not happy, but I'll give it a best shot. Right now we're coming into the escort maps of the tier list. Escort is just moving the payload straight away, unlike Hybrid where you have to capture a control point first. And Circuit Royale is the best of them. Or one of the best, I should say. It came out with Overwatch 2 back in, 2022 now, so nearly 3 years old. And I just love the pathing through the map. You've got the first turn where, and thankfully they added a couple more vantage points where you can get up to the stairs on the right. You can go through a building underneath the balcony that's straight ahead of the spawn point. They've certainly improved it a little bit more from what it was, because initially I think you could get quite oppressed, and I think in the hands of certain DPS snipers and such, you can still get oppressed, but it certainly feels a lot fairer now than when it first came out. The pathing through the map is perfection. As I say, that first turn, You go straight, you go under the bridge, you turn left. It almost feels like the car you're escorting is careering through the streets of Monaco. You've got the high ground looking down as you turn that final corner into the hill at the first capture point. Second capture point is probably my least favorite part because of, you have to ascend that uphill. But then you're rewarded with the inside, the inner workings of Circuit Royale, that sort of branching high ground. You take the steps to the right, you go up, there's a bridge balcony overlooking everything. There's a pool garden sort of up high for the enemies to look down upon as the car is escorted through to the end point. I just think it's a brilliant map. Anytime I see Circuit Royale, I'm voting for it, unless there's certain other maps that come up. Dorado. It's a classic map. Really great map. There are some points where you do feel a bit oppressed. Certainly at the start of the map, with high ground snipers looking down as you have to sort of force the payload around that first corner. But as long as you've got an adaptable tank that's not sort of stuck to the payload, and you've got a Diva that can go up there, a Winston, I feel like this can be a really fun map that's fair on both sides. Havana, similar story really. That first point can feel oppressive, but again, these are two maps that they reworked to add a little bit more fairness for the attacking side. So for Dorado, they added that lift to the building on the left, and I think they added a bit around the right-hand side as well. Changed some of the roofing at the right-hand side, I believe, just to make it easier and more approachable for the attacking team to sort of make angles, and less of an opportunity for the defending team to just sit and get free value by staying at the top of a building that sort of you have no way of getting to unless you can get round and then up. Havana, same sort of story. You would get sniped from the balconies straight across on that first street leading up. So they added some extra windowing, non-penetrable windowing that doesn't smash. So there's only a couple of, I think, Widowmakers and Ashes and Hanzos can either go on the left side or the right-hand side of that. They had some bunting and some banners that stream across the street to sort of provide a little bit of cover from sniper fire. And then the rest of the map's just fine. You go through a little brewery. There's an upper path, a lower path, there's an outside, there's a very high ground on top of the, what are they called, the vats, the brewery tanks where Widowmakers and Ashes can sort of sit and snipe from. I think it's just very fun. And then that final assault on the ruined castle towards the end is just a very dramatic ascent towards the castles, but particularly for a defending team who can look down from the ramparts and the sort of the broken wall on the right, the it's not really a drawbridge, but the bridge across the underpass. I think it's just a very fun map, and I would enjoy playing Havana anytime it came on. Junkertown, I think it's slightly less. As you could probably tell, I quite like an escort map. They're all getting quite high votes. Junkertown, I think for me, the first point is quite open. And I'm somebody that likes to use the cover to my advantage and not have to rely on the team too much in a way. I find that snipers can do quite well on this map, particularly on first point. You've got the Widowmaker sniping point for attackers at that top balcony from the spawn. Similarly, for the defenders, you've got the bridge, the balcony bit across the way, and then as the payload enters Junkertown itself, the big gate, you've got that back end where Widowmakers can sort of sit, as well as the little high ground window here. So there's a lot of different angles that defenders can take that perhaps I just get overwhelmed by. And I'm just like, do I have to look there? Do I have to look there? Do I have to look underneath? Do I have to look underneath? Do I have to look up here where the Junkertown sign is? Because there are bits where the metal sheeting and the fencing stops and they can look through there as well. It's just a lot for an attacker to worry about and a defender to use against you. As you get inside, it becomes a sort of a different story where you can sort of turn that against them. You can take the high ground. You can go around this balcony that they were once using against you and maybe take an angle on them as the cart pushes through Junkertown streets into the sort of the arena, which I think is where the Junker Queen intro video movie is all set within sort of the arena, which I think is a very fun section of the map. You've got this spinning rotor blades at the top that you can sort of jump to, yank to, lasso to, whatever Widowmaker's whip thing is. Ash can get up there. You can jump across if you take the stairway on the right. Similarly, if you're a defender, you can climb the stairs to the left of spawn and then go up there yourself. Yeah, I think overall fun to play. If there are other maps there on the voting screen, I might choose them, but if there's nothing really that I'm certainly if Oasis and Busan are there, I know I'm picking Junkertown. Rialto is a funny one. I don't quite know why, but I tend to link this with Paris. Perhaps both being European, sort of Venice and Paris, cities of romance, bridges, nice architecture. I tend to link them the same, and I know Paris gets a lot of bad rep for being a 2CP map, and I'm sure we'll come on to that in a bit because I've added those into this tier list. But Rialto I quite enjoy, particularly the first point. I think it's very fun, both as an attacker and a defender. You don't sort of feel too at odds. Unlike the Dorado first point, you can make do with what you've got. There's high grounds for both teams. Pushing the payload through to the statue part and then across the bridge. I feel like that's probably the worst part of the map, to be fair, is that the actual Rialto itself, which I think is that second bridge, not the first bridge. I believe the Rialto in Venice is just a very long wooden bridge. Certainly from playing Assassin's Creed 2. And then as it winds around and up the street and into the final... As it winds around the street and goes up into the final area of the map, I feel like it's still fair for both teams. I mean, I'm sure Blizzard has considered fairness in each of the maps, but you don't feel like there's necessarily more advantages for either side, whether you're an attacker or defender, and I think that gets Rialto a fun to play. Route 66 is, for me, a classic Overwatch 1 map. A bit like Nepal, a bit like Lijiang. Probably one of the first maps that I played. Certainly one of the first escort maps. It's very charming, it's very visually pleasing with the sort of the Grand Canyon aesthetic. You pass the abandoned gas station, you wind the streets into this sort of hidden base. I'm not really sure if I know what that base is all about, to be fair. I know the map, but I don't know if I know the lore behind what that base means. So if you know, leave a comment below, because I'm streaming live now on Twitch, but this will be uploaded to YouTube as well. If you know more about Route 66 than I do, which is potentially all of you, let me know what that final base is all about. But particularly one of my favourite parts of this map is the reference to King of the Hill, the propane supply shop that acts as the spawn point for the defenders. A very nice touch to a classically American map, and that's going to secure itself the second S tier for the escort maps. We got Shambali Monastery next, which again, I genuinely love Shambali Monastery. Every time it comes up, I'm thinking, I'm picking that. Unless Circuit Royale's there, and then I have a bloody good think about whether I am picking either one of those. But I just find, particularly on defense for Shambali Monastery, and I normally prefer playing attack, but on Shambali Monastery, I think I prefer playing defense because it's just fun the whole way through. You've got these high grounds as you ascend the streets and the slopes towards the monastery. You've got the buildings, the character. It's quite often at night. I think they once did an evening map where it's a little bit of an orange hue, but quite often it's night, so it's candle lit, sort of like the image of it here. So it's got that sort of like, I don't know, darkness to it, that moodiness that really speaks to me. And canonically, obviously, it's connected to quite a few characters. You've got Ramatra, Zenyatta, Genji, all at one point were within this monastery. So I feel like story-wise, it's quite rich and profound in sort of the way that characters have been here and you're experiencing those streets. And I think it's fair to say that, you know, you can play whatever you want to play on this map. If you're a flyer, quite a lot of the map is outside. The caves and the building here, sure, you go inside, but then you're back outside within a couple of 100 meters or tens of meters. So I don't think there's anyone that I would not want to play on this map. It's very open to interpretation, and I think that's what makes a map great, is that you don't necessarily have to play a certain character. You can do what you want, you can play how you want, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, you learn from it. And then we got the final escort map, which is Watchpoint Gibraltar, which is the sort of the famous Overwatch introduction map, Winston's recall, where he's sending out a message to all of the former Overwatch members. And I think for that reason, it gets a lot of sort of nostalgia points for sort of being the intro map. You can see on the screens in the spawn room for the attackers a lot of the Easter eggs and references towards that movie and Overwatch reuniting and Winston recalling everyone. I think as a map, it's not too bad either. Sure, you have to push the cart through a lot of low ground, and there's a lot of high ground opposing for the defenders to take. But if you can take that off them, you're winning. And I feel like that's certainly the people in my rank don't understand, is that if we take that high ground off them and we challenge that high ground and give as good as they can get, because it's quite easy for the defenders to get up there, whereas actually it's fairly easy for us to get up there as well as attackers, because there's a staircase just to the right. Yeah, I think it's a good map the whole way through. There's low grounds, there's high grounds the whole way through. First point, second point, you've got the giant aircraft in the middle that quite a lot of Widowmakers, Ashes, seen Faras and Echoes stay up there. I think Baptiste has a good opportunity up there. I was going to say window of opportunity, but I'm not necessarily sure that's the best place to put his ult. But, you know, if you've got other team members up there, or you're shooting your healing grenades down. Overall, I think it's great. If it were to come up against Circuit Royale and Shambali Monastery, probably wouldn't pick it. But as a map, I'd certainly love to play it. It's got a lot of good memories. I think overall I've probably had more good experiences than bad. Now we get into Flashpoint, one of the newer modes from Overwatch 2. We got 3 maps so far, which is, I think, the mode with the lowest? No, because Clash is a thing, and there's only 2 Clash maps. So the mode with the second lowest now, thanks to this new map, which came out with the start of the current season, Season 17. And you can see me umming and ahhing about where to put it. I think visually it's very samey, very dull. Maybe not perhaps dull, but it's hard to get lost. And I've seen a lot of comments in text chat at the start of the game after map votes where perhaps this wasn't even necessarily the most voted, but it's been picked by the map voter algorithm. And people are going, oh no, who chose this? Who voted for this rubbish? Oh, it's so hard to navigate, you know, it's easy to get lost. And I think I agree with that, because there aren't any sort of unique features to the streets. Maybe I have not played it enough yet. Maybe there'll be a sudden realization for me, an epiphany in a couple of months, a couple of weeks, where I go, hang on a minute, this is quite diverse. Because the points themselves, they are quite unique, but I just think that the pathing in between each of those points, it all looks the same. So I'm thinking that this is a map that I don't think I would personally vote for. I don't know if that's the same for you guys. Let me know what you're thinking about Aatlis. Aatlis? Not really sure how to pronounce the double A. But if you've got strong feelings about this map, you love it, you hate it, you really hate it, pop a comment down below and let me know why, because I'm interested to know. And how do you think that they could improve it if you, like me, think that this is not the best map that Blizzard has put out? Turning the tables now, we've got New Junk City, which is, I think, the wider area of Junkertown. So Junkertown being sort of like on the periphery of what are we, not post-apocalyptic, but futuristic Australia. And I think it's fun to play. This was the first Flashpoint map I played. This central arena is very striking visually, with the sort of like the open hexagonal roof with the 1, 2, 3 sides. I think 3, there might be 4 sides that you can jump down to. There are little rooms on each side that you can, you know, cower under, hide, take an angle from. And this map also reminds me of that sort of like, what was it, the Battle of the Beasts or something with the giant orisas. I forget what sort of like seasonal event or seasonal happening that event was for. But you'd have these giant orisas in the middle fighting each other, and then you'd go off to another map and capture that, and then that would lead towards an advantage in the fight back here again afterwards, where your orisas would fight each other again. So I had some good memories of playing that mode as well as playing Flashpoint on this map. So I think, yeah, it was fun to play. If I'm presented with all 3 Flashpoint maps, or this map and some control maps, I'm definitely going to pick New Junk City. Suravasa, I think, is in the same boat. Visually, it's easy to navigate. From this screenshot, or the little Overwatch wiki screenshot of the map, you'd think, oh, it's just all teal. But the streets leading from spawn are all sort of like brick, terracotta. The points themselves are quite visually different. You've got that sort of lower sunken ruins that I think in a recent Overwatch developer video they've said that they're adding some new aesthetics to. So like giving it Last of Us kind of vibes, where the nature has outgrown the communities that would use these ruins. The ruins themselves will be set in a sort of pool of water. There'll be trees and moss and vines growing out the side of it. You've got the central point with the not really sure what to call it, the crosshatch netting that's not really netting around the outside of it, the high ground balconies looking into it. Similarly for the point just to the left of the one in the picture here, with the sort of like the fountain in the middle, you've got that high ground balcony looking down. You've got the two sort of balconies in each corner and the stairs leading in for each team. And I think I just sort of get the image of sort of gold and yellow, and overall this map just sort of speaks of rich colors, and that sort of it evokes to me of sort of like the history of sort of, I don't know, the silk trade, where everything is sort of like, you know, your colors and your quality and your visuals are what's the proudest to you, and that certainly speaks volumes in this map. So yeah, I would say that it's fun to play. Out of the two, it would be a coin toss for me between New Junk City and Suravasa, and I'd be happy to play either of those as long as I didn't have to play Aatlis. Right, and now we move on to potentially my favorite game mode of them all, which is hybrid. I like it because you have to catch the control point and then escort the cart. And I think that brings a sort of a dynamic of both the classic 2CP points as well as the escort maps themselves, where you're carrying this payload up a hill. We start with Blizzard World, which is just a fun map, isn't it? It's a theme park based on all different Blizzard IPs. You've got the Hearthstone boards in the spawn. You've got the World of Warcraft stuff. I don't know enough about Blizzard lore, but everything is just sort of visually appealing. Balloons everywhere. And it was another, just like Lijiang, another map where they added Prop Hunt to. I think the first map they added Prop Hunt to, wasn't it? Where you could be like a shark hiding up a wall, or you'd get people pretending to be a bush on top of a tree, and there's no way that anyone would have seen that because it blended in so well. So it's got almost a double layer of fun to it. So I think Blizzard World, S tier. Just for the fact that it's so versatile, so fun. And yeah, Eichenwalde, another of those classic Overwatch 1 maps. And I think it's going to earn another S, because of how much lore is packed into this. This is Reinhardt's home, his castle. You see the throne from the cinematic. You have the characters who comment on Reinhardt's having lived through what he's been through on this map. I think it's Farah that says, "Oh, what Reinhardt has had to go through," and stuff like that. So it's clearly impactful to all the other Overwatch roster. As a map, again, it's a fun control point to get. It doesn't feel too oppressive because there's different angles you can take, and it works well if you're a flyer because you can just fly high, deny that high ground bridge to Hanzos and soldiers and ashes. You can take a left, you can take a right around the big clock tower in the middle, and then once you're carrying the payload up the hill, you've got a myriad of different ways. You can go up the stairs, you can take high ground, you can go underneath and come out behind them. It's just so much you can do with the map. Hollywood, again, brilliant map. One from Overwatch 1 as well, so it's got that classic to it. I don't think I like it as much as Eichenwalde, and For some reason in this picture it's very moody and purple. I don't know if there was some sort of like Halloween skin overlay on it around Halloween time. But it's just sort of like that movie nostalgia, that sort of Americana. You're taking I guess, film executive through a Hollywood set into a recording studio, through to a trailer, presumably to see some big Hollywood star. Again, I don't know enough about the lore of Hollywood, so you know more about, what's the point of carrying this Hollywood executive through the map. Let me know in the comments below. But I think it's going to be an A map from me. Now, you don't call a map King's Row without having a certain amount of confidence that this is going to be the king of maps. Because I think very unanimously across the Overwatch community, this is the gold standard for Overwatch map work. Every time King's Row comes up, I play it. I used to play with a friend where if we were on a losing streak, it would be we keep playing until we get King's Row, and then we'll be happy to call it a night. Similarly, if we were on a winning streak and we win on King's Row, that would be the crowning achievement, where we've topped the night off with a win on King's Row, and we'll call it a night and move on to the next day. The map itself is just so windy, as if you are actually through the sort of the narrow streets of London. You've got high grounds, you've got streets that you can go through, buildings you can go through. Sombras do well on it, Tracers do well on it, Widowmaker does well on it, Anna, Reinhardt storming through the choke, first point by the bus. And yet you've got that character of London, you've got the double-decker buses, you've got the red phone booth. And as someone from the UK, it's sort of nice to see that quite unanimously, everyone who plays Overwatch and everyone who enjoys Overwatch seems to think that this is one of the best maps on there. And as a British person, I agree with them. No bias at all. Midtown, which I believe is New York. Gets very festive and sort of colourful the more you go into the streets. Very pride focused, and we're all for that. So for me it's S as well. Midtown is just such a diverse mix of highs, of lows, of streets, of tunnels, of alleys, of angles. It feels like it's different every time you play it. And it brings me back to a point earlier that I made, where you can play whatever you want on Midtown and you can get away with it. It doesn't feel too oppressive. If there's a Widowmaker taking angles on that high ground to the left of the first corner, you can go underneath and round and up. If there's people on the high ground in the middle point, as you have to go under and come out the other side, you can go right, you can go left, you can go under. There's just so much you can do in this map, and I think it's Overwatch map design at its finest. And then that final point, as you sort of navigate your way through the building, you've got the high ground, you've got that lift in the back, and then it just opens up into this big sort of corridor, sort of reminiscent of a big bank lobby. I'm not sure whether the building itself is supposed to be a bank, but I don't know why it reminds me of the big bank building in Hitman 2, the more recent Hitman 2, that was merged into the world of Assassination, where it's just like a giant New York bank with a big building, big space. So yeah, really like Midtown. If it's coming up against maps like King's Row, Circuit Royale, Shambali Monastery, it's going to be a tough choice. I think at that point I would probably just try and even out the votes to give everything an even chance and just leave it up to the random number generator to decide for me, because it's a tough one. Numbani, probably the most controversial of all of the hybrid maps. A very dominating high ground as you first turn the first corner. You've got the bus below and the high ground above that is famously covered by widowmakers and ashes and sojourns. But I think it's still fun. If you're a diva or a Winston, you can get away with jumping up there and scaring them off, because invariably the defending team is split between that left side balcony and that right side room that leads around to the other side of the start point. So as long as you coordinate and sort of keep that Winston and that diva or whoever's storming that high ground alive, I think that it can be very rewarding. So I'm going to put it in a really good map. Not S tier, because there have been some frustrations, certainly on my part, where different team members have just sort of like decided to go off on their own. And not do very much with it. And it basically turns into a 4v5, or we've got a team member down that's just trying to, you know, do whatever they want. But on the flip side of that, I've had some great defenses myself. Sigma on the high ground is very strong. Shield and the rock from above is very satisfying to land. You can beat Anna in the back. Baptiste. Kiriko does well because she's so nimble and versatile. It's another one of those maps where I think, certainly if you're a defender, you can probably get away with playing anything. If you're an attacker, it might be a little bit more rigid in what you need to play to get through that first point, but once you're through, I think it's open to interpretation about what you can play. Because there's less of a domineering high ground. Sure, you've got that sort of wide high ground around that second point that leads to the capture, but it's just so open aside from the room at the back. So if a Widowmaker is taking rest in the middle of that high ground and is nowhere near an exit point, you can take advantage of that and get rewarded for it. So I think, yeah, it can be dominating, but I think overall it's fair, particularly with the fact that they've changed a lot of the map design, a bit like Dorado and a bit like Havana, to make it a little less domineering for defenders, a little bit more open for attackers to get around, and sort of make it easier for everyone to navigate and make the best use of the terrain. The final hybrid map, a new one. I think it was part of the Overwatch 2 release, or not long after. No, I think it was part of the release, and it was also Lucio's story mission. RIP PvE. It kind of makes me wish that there's like a Gothenburg hybrid or escort map, because of the PvE link. But we'll save that for I'm sure Blizzard can cook something up and add a Gothenburg map in the future. But for Pariso, I think, similarly with Numbani, I think it's fun to play. Or fun to play is B. I think it's a really great map. Already contradict myself. I think it's a great map. I think this, particularly the bit in the screenshot, is for me probably the best part. Coming up that street with the colourful buildings, the vibrancy of that Brazilian landscape. As we head towards Lucio's club, everything sort of like, it looks like a children's playland. I assume in America it'd be like a Chuck E. Cheese or whatever, where it's just all sorts of different colours, and I can imagine it being a really fun nightclub to be in. Now we're getting into the push territory, and we've got quite a few maps in push, considering it's a new Overwatch 2 mode. You've got Colosseo, which is a big Italian map, and I really enjoy Colosseo. I think it's really fun to play. I like the music that comes on as it starts. It kind of gives me like, I don't know if anyone ever played Bejeweled, where it's just got that sort of like deep synthy atmospheric kind of music. It only plays for what, 10-15 seconds, but it's a good 10-15 seconds. And as a push map goes, it's kind of it's fair. It's more fair now than it was to start with the fact that they've changed so much of the that inner corridor within the Colosseum itself, where you can, there's no sort of like unnecessary glass windows that were just like, you couldn't break it, you couldn't go through it, you couldn't smash it with a gun or a grenade or anything like that. So it opens a lot of possibility for escape, for entry, for angles. And then you've got the winding around the slopes and the high ground looking down. It just gives everybody a chance to do something, no matter what character you're on. Again, a map that is open to player interpretation. Esperanza, or Esperanza, I think is how it's pronounced. It's another sort of like a Portuguese map. And I think it's okay. I think if you had to pick an absolute medium Overwatch 2 map, Esperanza, that would be my medium point. It's very visually nice, very bright, very sunny. Again, like Rialto, it just sort of, it looks very European and sort of historic, Gothic architecture and streets and sun, blue skies. But as a push map, it's just sort of like, eh. I don't know if there's sort of any like detracting qualities or positive qualities. It just it does what it says on the tin. You push the robot down a slope, round a corner, up a slope, and around a corner. Perhaps if there were some more twists and some more turns, we could go through a building under a bridge, rather than under a sort of like just an awning that you can't stand on. I mean, there is an awning that you can stand on as well, but that's not what I mean. Yeah, I think it's middle. It's definitely middle. New Queen Street. I've never been to Canada. I would love to go to Canada. This is the Sojourn map, I believe, which is, I don't remember if this is like directly within Sojourn's PV. I think it is, because you come out of, we're not putting it in E. You come out of the subway. Because I remember the subway being the most annoying part of that PvE mission. Damn, I wish they would release some more PvE. Even if it was just like an archives thing every year, where they did, they did the King's Row map with Tracer and Torbjorn and Mercy and Reinhardt. They did the Rialto map. They did the, I forget what the third one, Havana, that third one with Tracer and Genji. I wonder what happened with that. Maybe the team that was doing it was part of the PvE team. They evolved into doing PvE and then sort of stopped. And I, for the life of me, don't know why archives, game mode, maps, missions aren't within the existing missions screen that they've currently got in the game. But anyway, I feel like I've gone on a bit of a PvE tangent there. New Queen Street, definitely better than Esperanza. I'm not sure. I think that. Because you've got the sort of monorail bridge type thing in the middle. Which is accessible to everyone. You've got that high ground on the left around the statue, or right if you're coming from the other side. It's sort of all uphill, so if you're defending, you feel like you've got a good chance. And and if you're attacking, you feel like, oh, you have to be a bit careful and watch your head. Yeah, I just think it's a great map. You could say that I'm a bit hypocritical, because it's probably similar to Esperanza in that you push a robot round a corner, up a hill, and then round a corner. There's even less to do. But I think the positioning of the buildings, the aesthetic with the ice and the snow and the Canadian hospitality, it's just a good map, a really great map. And then we've got the last of the full push maps, and I call it full push maps because the next two after this are sort of shrunken down stadium versions, and there are some stadium push maps as well, like Colosseo has one, that I won't bother covering here because they're just sort of shrunken down versions of the existing map. Runasapi, I think it's bright, it's visual, it's Peru, if I'm not mistaken, as well. So it's got that Southern American charm that sort of Paraiso has. I think at first I didn't like Runasapi because the downhill stretch and the uphill stretch felt very sort of like long and open and uncovered, particularly when you get down to the bottom. And there's the balcony on each side that it's sort of like it meant that hole down at the bottom area was a place you didn't want to be if they had a good DPS on the high ground. But I think since then I've come to enjoy it for what it is as sort of like a very good push map with wines, with turns, with buildings that you can go into, shortcuts, high grounds, different routes and angles. And I think it's certainly it's a better iteration of at least two of the first two push maps, Colosseo and Esperanza. Not that Colosseo is bad, and not that New Queen Street is any worse, but Runasapi, for me, I think it's fun and it's a good map that they've added since adding the initial game mode, and I would like to see them add full versions of the next two maps, particularly Redwood Dam, because I think, again, it's sort of like it gives that sort of nature meets modernity vibe that some of the other maps have going on. But first we'll start with Place La Croix, which is the French, the Widowmaker-y push map with a very long, and I say very long, corridor down the middle. I'm going to put it, actually I would say I would rather not play that. I feel like far too often in my stadium games there's been a disparity between which direction the team goes. We either go right or left if you're on the left side, straight to the street, and invariably there's some sort of ash or some spam or something that means that the tank gets burned down instantly. The rest of the team has to kite back, and someone invariably ends up dying in the process, and then you lose a lot of ground because they've come around. What I prefer to do is to come the slightly longer route round through the archway and use the length of the map to advantage, and sort of hide behind pillars and jump up and take the longer angle rather than the shallow breadth of the street. But overall, I think I would rather not have this come up in my stadium roster of maps. I'm not sure, I can't, it's been a little while since I played any stadium, but I feel like you're guaranteed a push map, so I'm hoping that it's any other map than this. Redwood Dam, I think, is really great. I like it. It's open, yet it's closed. And I don't really mean closed as in like you can't do anything. I think that there's a lot of open space that can be used to do a lot if you're sort of a nimble and agile character, and there's a lot of closed space and high ground that you can use to your advantage if you're a Kiriko, if you're a Hanzo, and you can take angles. And I've just had some good matches on this map. As Moira, as Juno. Not so much as Anna. I feel like the openness has detracted, but particularly for my skill level of Anna as I come into playing PC for not very long. Perhaps back on console, I'd feel a little bit more at home with the heightened mechanical skill I would have on the controller. But overall, Redwood Dam is very nice. It's a nice looking map. I like the trees, the nature against the industrial feel of the dam itself and the buildings around. So yeah, I would rate that an A. And we're on to the last two maps of, we'll call it the main game mode, your quick play and your competitive and your stadium. Hanaoka, which is not a rework, but we'll call it an offshoot of Hanamura, the old 2CP assault map from the Genji and Hanzo lore cinematic. I think inherently Clash is a game mode that I am less enamored with than all the others. As a map, it's a very nice map. It's very visually pleasing. It's got that sort of same pink hue as Hanamura. But it's got that sort of the mean streets of Japan to it as well. So like you can imagine walking through it at night and just enjoying the scenery. So I think it's fun to play as a map. As a game mode, I'm not necessarily certain that I would pick Clash. If they turn this into a push map, like the length of the area and sort of like made the push robot wind around, I could see that working, or any other mode. But as a map, yeah, it's fine. And I think similarly with Throne of Anubis, I think they're fun to play. I'm not actually. I'm gonna rank it down one because I don't think it's as good as Hanaoka. I think that central point is quite tough if the enemy team has sort of like an advantage against your team. So if they've got Junkrat spam, Farah spam, and you've got the wrong tank for the job, because it's the first point and they sort of like we've come in at sort of like a random coin toss of heroes, and you've got the short straw, it can feel like it's hard to win back the momentum on that. But if you get the momentum from that first point, I feel like it does quite well. But then that's inherently the downside of Clash, is it's quite a momentum based mode where if you take a point, or you take a fight rather, and you win the fight, one of your team stays behind to capture the point, the rest of the team go ahead and stagger the rest, it can just sort of snowball the entire game. But I think that that's quite hard for Blizzard and the development, the maps team, to sort of get around, is how do they control that? And I'm not sure, certainly with my zero map creating experience, is a way that I can do that, or think of a way that they can do that. Again, this, I don't know whether this could be a push map. Put the robot in the middle, have him wind his way through the streets, slightly alter the route, the building architecture. But then that's just me. I don't know whether other people enjoy Clash far more than me. Again, if you enjoy Clash, if you enjoy Hanaoka and Throne of Anubis, let me know down below. Let me know what you like about them the most. Let me know if there's any other maps. Would you like to see Volskaya Industries as the next Clash map? Would you like to see Paris and Horizon Lunar Colony get the same treatment? Because that's what these two maps are sort of based on, is keeping the aesthetic of the old assault maps alive. You've got Hanamura and you've got Temple of Anubis. And they couldn't quite get around the map controversies and downfalls for Assault. And I'm not sure how well they can get around it for Clash. So now we move into Assault, which is 2CP, if you're used to calling it that. And these are all maps that you can play in arcade. I don't know whether they added a selection to arcade permanently yet, or whether it's still just it flashes up invariably. So if you load up on a Tuesday and it's not there, try on a Wednesday, it could be there. And there are 5 maps within that subsection, that game mode. We've already talked about 2 of them. Hanamura, the predecessor to Hanaoka. And I really liked Hanamura. I thought it was a good map. I liked the difference in the 2 points. The first point was very much outside, a sort of open market courtyard. Was it a gong or was it a bell in the capture point? And then you move through a sort of blossomy garden. In fact, the exact blossomy garden in the picture here. You move through that into the dojo, the temple that Genji and Hanzo have their fight within the dragons, I think it was called, cinematic. And there's different snippets here and there of their fight. I think if you go up onto the left-hand side, you can see the arrow that Hanzo shot and Genji sliced in half, lying in the floor, and it's been too long since I played it. Perhaps later on when we switch over to Overwatch, I'll load up the arcade and see what we can find. But yeah, Hanamura, visually, gameplay wise, as sort of like a map that you can path through, I think it was great. Game mode aside, and the sort of the difficulties that they had with 2CP, I think a great map. Horizon, perhaps not the absolute worst, but I think I really didn't like it. I didn't like the outside bit with the zero gravity. I didn't like the sort of the overarching high ground everywhere as you approach that first point. I felt that the second point felt a lot like Horizon or Watchpoint Gibraltar even. So you've got like the sort of the wall that blocks the spawn, and you come around the left and right hand side into the big sort of square. I don't know what more I can say. I just really quite didn't like Horizon Lunar Colony. I know a lot of people on the internet didn't like this. They didn't like Paris. Perhaps the limitations as well of the 2CP game mode as well, where if you're on the back foot, it can be hard to recover, whereas if you are overperforming and absolutely steamrolling, it can be a bit of a cakewalk. I'm sure there are times back in Overwatch 1 where we played Horizon Lunar Colony and we stormed both points within a minute because the enemy were on the back foot. One sec. Some car outside driving past with some reggae. Not sure if I'm allowed to have background reggae. Don't want to get a DMCA strike. by passive. But yeah, very summary. Anyway, that's probably a good segue to move into the next 2CP map, which is Paris, which I actually didn't mind as a map. Paris was a very visually pleasing, as I've said, with Rialto. And what was the other one? It was Esperanza. They just sort of like, as someone from Europe and as someone who you know, only went to Paris earlier this year, to be fair, but as someone who's sort of grown up with these places in storybooks, in media, in news, as sort of like, it's there in the forefront is what I'm trying to get. So Paris, the closest country to the UK as well, so I feel like there's a sort of, despite the historic rivalry between Paris and the UK, I think there's a camaraderie and there's a brotherhood there. I think as a map, it's very unique, it's very charming. I understand the difficulties it had, particularly that first point where, you know, you'd get just a bastion and an Orisa sat up on that high ground, which was placed just by a door as well. So if they needed to reset for a moment or two, all they had to do was back up slightly to the left and recharge, wait for the cooldowns to come back online, and then continue dominating from that just one point. And I think there was just a little bench and a tiny wall to the right. So I don't know if, had they taken that doorway out, had they taken that bench and wall out, it would be a little harder for people to just sit on that high ground and dominate that choke, because that was the only choke you could go through, right? You had to go through that choke to some extent, just by the car in the front. So that first alley, at the end of it, there's a car and a choke, and you had to go either straight ahead and right, which would take you through the building and to that doorway I just mentioned, or you could go left through a little sort of like, I think it was a patisserie kitchen, or you could take the open route through the left and the street. So it was quite hard to navigate that first section because everything involved going past that high ground camping point. But as you go into the second point, I felt like it was more open and fair. And I think Overwatch developers and Blizzard clearly think that second part of the map is a good part of the map because they used it for that Hanzo Scatter Arrow Valentine's event recently. And I don't know whether it's part of the deathmatch roster. I've not included it in the deathmatch maps below. So yeah, Paris, I like it, fun to play. Perhaps they could make it into a clash. Don't see why not. They've got 2 points, perhaps add another 3. Quick maths. 2 add 3 is 5. Or they could make it a push map. Or they could make it like a payload map. Just add a few more streets. Maybe even just have the car at the first alleyway be the payload. Who knows? I'm not a map designer. It's probably evident that I'm not. We'll just move on to Temple of Anubis. I think this is the same as Hanamura. It's up there. If there was only 2CP in the game, I think this and Hanamura would be the best 2 maps. Just because they are iconic visually. This is just very Egyptian sand stonework, or sandstonework. It feels like you're within the world of sort of like The Mummy. Brendan Fraser would feel at home here. And aside from like the the limitations of the 2CP game mode. There's a good high ground around the capture point for A. You've got the top of the building to the left. You've got the top of the building to the right with the different levels. And then around the second point, you've got those pillars. You've got the archway that you can widow grapple up to. Grapple, that's the word I was looking for earlier. Widow grapple up to. Farah rocket jump up to. So yeah, I think overall it's a good map. Volskaya similarly. In fact, I'd forgotten about Volskaya when discussing these two. I think Volskaya might be my favourite of the assault maps, obviously. Just some good memories of Volskaya. I like the giant robots wandering the background. I like the sort of the aesthetic of like dirty industrial Russia in the snow. It very much reminds me of sort of like Reznov and Call of Duty World at War. I like playing Zarya, so for me it's kind of like this is her map, so I should probably enjoy it. And aside from the choke is quite wide, which gives you angles to take. You can aside from going left, right, and up through the little hole in the wall, you can sim TP off to the left, which was a favorite technique of people, certainly that I was in games with, and then come at them from behind. And then you progress through the second point, and it's just sort of like an arena with high ground all around it, moving platforms, big dominating red metal walls, and all sorts. Yeah, just I liked it for what it was, as a moody, does what it says, and that's that. I think definitely would love to see Volskaya reworked in some form as a map in another game mode. I don't know if they're intending on adding perhaps it as a control map for Stadium. Like, I don't know whether you could put B as the control and have both teams coming at it from a different... It would involve some sort of like map extension, but I would certainly love to see it redone in some way. Because like Hanamura and like Temple of Anubis, it does deserve its time to shine again. And then I think this is sort of like a bonus round with the rest of the maps, because it's not often that I play team deathmatch or deathmatch, free-for-all, those sorts of modes, because they are just not something that I enjoy. So we're going to do this purely on aesthetics. Chateau Guillard, aesthetically, I feel like the fun to play doesn't really work anymore. But aesthetically, I'm gonna give it an A. It's a gothic, moody castle with a lot of corridors. I think there's a library. There's a dank dungeony part with like a wet floor, outsides, insides, jump pads. I can see why people play deathmatch because of this map. I think at one point this may have been one of only two. But yeah, visually very nice. Kanazaka, I think it hits more on that sort of confusing, like Aatlis. I'm not going to say it's the absolute worst, but I wouldn't choose it if I had it there. If they were to rework this into a sort of like a control map, because I think isn't it part of their Hanaoka kind of lore, Kanazaka? Like, is that the Hanamura Tower in the background, and this is the mean streets below, which would make sense for the bounty hunting mode that was associated with it, and that I can really only remember was the sort of Ash bounty hunting game mode. I think, yeah, it's an E from me. Malevento is probably the map I have played on least out of every single Overwatch 1, Overwatch 2 map. But that doesn't necessarily mean I've not appreciated it when I have played it. Again, I think it's Italy, so it gives me that sort of Assassin's Creed 2 vibes. I'm going to put it in fun to play. Petra reminds me of, I think there was a competitive deathmatch mode that came out, and I thought, oh, you know, I'll give it a go because it's competitive. And as a map, it's quite cool. It's similar to Anubis and well, the other one's still called Anubis, Temple and Throne, in that it's sort of like a 2000s, 90s adventurer vibe, where, you know, the eccentric archaeologist teams up with the butch gunslinger and save the day kind of vibe. And I think that is all it's got going for it. There's not much to it. There's a big hole in the floor, which I think it gradually gets removed as people attack it and do damage to it, which I think is a bit silly when that's the main central area, apart from the bridge, I suppose. I seem to recall there was a game mode that you... Was it the Junker Queen free-for-all mode as well that used this? Is that where I'm thinking I've played more of it? Let me know below if you can remember what modes used Petra, because I can't. Ayutthaya just reminds me of Capture the Flag, which was a fair old slog. I'm quite glad they added Capture the Flag Blitz. In terms of a map, it's quite nice. It's very visually pleasing, very similar to Oasis in that it's quite ornate and equal parts nature and architecture. I think it's a Symmetra kind of inspired map, isn't it? And it certainly fits the feel of the character. So we'll stick that in B. Black Forest just reminds me of cake, like a Black Forest Gateau, which if we're rating on cake, I'm sticking it up in S because I love a Black Forest Gateau. Don't know about you. In terms of maps, it just reminds me of Snowball Elimination and that sort of mode, which I like as a mode, and I like it as a map. Very moody, very, again, nature overrunning society. The buildings are sort of in disrepair, there's trees growing everywhere. Doesn't necessarily give me that forest vibe. Maybe it's certainly a clearing in a forest, but yeah. Castillo, I just remember this from I think 4v4 Snowball, the one where you turn into icicles, like the May ice blocks if you get killed. I think it's okay. It's just a map, isn't it? It's just a big courtyard, stairs to a high ground, ring around it on both sides, and a sort of a coast that you can use for boopage. And similar, Eco Point Antarctica, I think that was another Maze Snowball offensive map. Very blue. I don't know why they didn't use this as one of the points for Eco Point, for Antarctic Peninsula. It's clearly in Antarctica. Who knows, maybe in the future they could add it to that, and maybe control points can have 3 or 5 maps, depending on, you know, map variety, preferences, whether they've got the resources to design more maps for existing modes, because I think a couple of like control maps could certainly do with a couple of extra arenas to make them even more fun to play. That's actually quite a good thought. I'm going to claim that now for myself. Control maps should all have 5 points. Lijiang can have 2 more. Samoa can have 2 more. Oasis, all of them. But Eco Point Antarctica, as it stands, it's meh. Actually, I'll put it in would rather not play. It's not scraping the bottom of the barrel, because I mean, it does fit the mood of Snowball Offensive. And if it were a map in the main roster, I don't think I would enjoy playing it. And Necropolis, as a map visually, it's a Petra, Anubis vibes with the sort of like historic archaeologist feeling vibes. I think, isn't this an Anna map? Well, it's like that, the map that is would make a death match. So not for me, who can't aim for absolute balls. I wouldn't say it was scraping the bottom of the barrel. I think visually we'll stick it in B. I mean, fun to play, we're ignoring. But visually, Necropolis is a B. It's moody, it's got some nature with its building work. It's got a little death pit in the middle. I think that'll do it. So that rounds it out, because that's all the maps I could think of in Overwatch 1, Overwatch 2, including Assault 2CP, including Deathmatch, and including Elimination. Let me know your thoughts on what maps are the best, what maps are the worst, or whether you think I'm wrong, whether you think I'm right, whether you think that there should be other maps added in the future. Where do you think Overwatch should go next? Where do you think Overwatch should revisit and alter a map like they've done with Dorado and Numbani? And are there any maps like Volskaya Industries that you'd like to see them bring back for a new game mode? Let me know your thoughts, and see you in the next video.